What's up everyone, welcome back for another video in creating a Wordle Companion App using R Shiny. So what we're going to do today is finally jump into including a word list and having that word list populate our text input here for word one. And then also when we click this lock guess button, having it populate each of these buttons that we have with the individual letters. So the first letter, second letter, and so on. So let's just dive right in and get started. So in the description below, you'll find a link to a GitHub page. That's the GitHub page I have open on the right here. And all you have to do is click download. And when you click download, you're going to take that wordlist.r data file and you're going to put it into your main Shiny app folder. So it should be in the same directory as your UI and your server files. So once you do that, you're going to go in here, and I already have it. You're going to write load wordlist.data. So then if we take a look at what this is, it gives us a data set that is called df. So we can look at it with head df, and it gives us 12,478 words, all of the individual letters that are at each location, the count of the letters at each location, so how many times is A the first letter, and the probability. How many times is A the first letter relative to all of the letters that we have, or all of the words that we have. So before we go ahead and actually get started adding a word list, getting it the next word, and populating, we have a couple of things that we're going to want to do to kind of prepare for the code that we're going to write. So up here in the Shiny server function, we're going to add session as an additional argument to our function. So now that we've done that, we're going to go up into our UI and we're going to add one package of string R. We're going to need this to subset our word to get each individual letter here to populate correctly with the correct letter in the correct spot. And then we also are only going to be working in word one here. So we can just highlight all these other words, hit Control-Shift-C, comment all of those out, and then delete our comma after word input UI for word one. So when we do that, if we run this app, all we're going to see is that we have word one, what the first guess is, our lock guess button, and then our individual buttons. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to change this so this no longer says first guess and is instead populated with what we consider to be a good first guess. And then when we click lock guess, we want to put each letter in the correct spot within the button labels. So to clean this up, we're going to go into our word input UI, and we don't want this to show first guess anymore, and we don't want our buttons to have numbers on them. So we can delete all of these, save that, and rerun. And now we just see an empty skeleton. So the first thing that we're going to try to do is we're going to add in so that there is a guess that populates into this text input when we have our word list. So to do that, we're going to create a word list one initially, just for a word list for our first word, which is going to be a reactive data set. We're going to do that based on this data set that we have here, and we're going to create a new column. This new column is just going to be a joint probability of all of the probabilities multiplied by each other. So what is the likelihood that each of these letters is in each of the spots? And then we're going to reduce the number of columns that we have. The columns that we care about are going to be words, the letters, the number of unique letters in the word, and then that joint probability variable that we created. So we're going to select words, all of the columns that start with an L, N for the number of unique letters, and then also our joint probability. And then one final step we want to take is we don't want to keep this as an alphabetical data set. Rather, we would want to have it so we have the most unique letters at the top and the highest joint probability at the top. So we can do that with arrange, descending order of the number of unique letters and descending of the joint probability. So if I go ahead here and run this data set, I'm just going to call this X and then head of X, we can see that our data set is no longer filtered alphabetically. We have a smaller number of columns, and we have the one with the highest joint probability at the top of our list. So perfect. Now that we have this, all we need to do is we need to get what that next word would be. And again, the next word we want is just the word that's the first entry within our data set because of how we've ordered it. So I'm going to call this next word one, and this is going to be a reactive data set. And we're going to use the word list one data set that we created above and feed that into our next word. So whenever we create a reactive data set, we have to add this open and close parentheses at the end as if it was a function for us to be able to actually access what that value is from the reactive data set. So what is it that we want to do with this data set here? We just want to slice that first row. So we only want to keep this first row here. So we're just going to slice that first row. So now that we have just one word here, so if I go here and I do X slice, x slice 1, we see that we now just have this one row. Perfect. So now we want to just put this words column of this next word into that text input that previously had said first guess. So in order to do that, what we're going to want to do is we want to observe event. So every time our next word 1 changes, what is it that we want to do? We want to update our text input for the word 1 with the value of next word 1, the words column. So we want to just every single time this next word changes, all we want to do is we want to take this column, which would be this word, and put that into our text input. So if I save this and run app, now we see we get cares that shows up there. Perfect. So we could still adjust this and do like Apple, and that wouldn't change anything. So we still have the full functionality to enter in our own word at this point. But if I click lock guess, nothing happens. So the next step that we're going to do is populate each of the letters into each of the boxes. So we want to do this every single time we click that lock guess button. So we want to observe event again. And this time we want to look for an input of our go 1 button, which is what we called in the input ID. Here, go 1 for the word ID, right? So go 1 for word 1. All right, and what is it that we want to do? We're going to want to update our button session, and let's just update the first letter of the first word at this point. And we're going to give it a label, to upper. To upper is just going to make it an uppercase letter like Wordle has it. And then we're going to subset our string of input word 1 for the first letter at the start and the first letter at the end. So this is just saying that we want only that first letter because we're going to start at the first letter and end at the first letter. So then if I run our app here and I click lock guess, we see that C populates. And then I can go copy this update button 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and then just change letter 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then again, we're also going to want to change this to correspond to the letters that we want to look at. So when we're looking at letter 2 to populate that label, we want to start at letter 2 and end at letter 2 to get us letter 2, and then so on. So now if I go here and click run app and I click lock guess, we now see that the C, A, R, E, and S have populated within our buttons. And we can still click them and change their colors based on what Wordle tells us the color change should be. So let's say I wanted to run this, but I didn't want to use the first word of cares. And instead, I wanted to use the first word of apple. If I click lock guess, we see that apple is what populates here. Perfect. So that gives us still control, so you're not forced to use what the next guess is, and you can still adjust it yourself. But what if I was to go here and I was to just do care instead of cares? So I deleted the S off the end and then click lock guess. Well, that's only 4 letters. So Wordle requires that we have at least or only 5-letter words that we're guessing. So what we need to do is we need to bake in the functionality that as long as we require that the entry that we have here is 5 letters long. So in order to do that, we want to lock the lock guess button unless the guess is 5 letters. So what we now want to do is we want to observe event, and we want to look at the input of every single time our word 1 is changing. And what we want to do is we want to count the number of characters in input of word 1. So what we can do is an if-else statement, and we have if the number of characters in input word 1 is not equal to 5, then we're going to disable our button. And our button again is called go 1 for the first word. Otherwise, if it is 5 letters, we want to enable our go 1 button. So if we go ahead and click run app now, so cares, we're good to lock guess, everything's fine there. Reload the app. If I make this care, well, now I can't click our lock guess button. So now we require that it is 5 letters long. If I add the S, we can now do this. So while we have the functionality to change the color of the individual buttons, it's not actually doing anything. We're not adjusting our word list based on that, and we should be, because if Wordle gives us a yellow background, then it's in the wrong spot, a green background, then it's in the right spot, and if it doesn't give us any change in the background, then it's not in the word at all. So we want to use that logic and information to adjust what our word list is, and that is what we're going to be doing in the next video. So stay tuned for that one, and I hope to see you all there.